I have some ladies here terrorizing my life. Come and say hi.
That's all right. It's all part of it.
Say hi to Michelle and
Hi.
You can't actually see their faces.
You couldn't see their you see. Okay. So I will have to just use my modem.
Okay, can we start now?
Just
Okay.
about 2 seconds. I want to use my phone's data instead of the modem.
Okay. It's African transport conversation, right?
Yeah, it's on the Maritime Initiative Africa.
Convos.
Okay.
You're doing it on Maritime Initiative.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's no need to mention African transport.
I think it's connected there as well. I'll share it there. Okay. Thanks everybody for joining us this evening. This is the third Maritime News Review that we're doing for the year. The first two, unfortunately, was not on this platform, the live platform. We've decided to move it to the live platform so you can also contribute if need be. So today we have some news items, as usual, curated by Marseille Afrique from Jeffrey Botchway. And we are fortunate to have him also today as the host of the program. So on this issue, we have quite a few topical issues to discuss, prompted by those news items. We may talk about the news items themselves, but we will try to discuss the issue generally in relation to Ghana, to Africa, and then try to educate and inform and be factual as much as possible. So you're welcome to the April Maritime News Review. We have, as usual, Dr. George vanDyck and Dr. Alberta Jonas on to discuss these issues, and myself, Jonas Aryee, as co-host or panelist with Jeffrey Botchway leading. So without much ado, we hand over to Jeffrey to lead us through those issues so that we can digest them. Over to you, Jeffrey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jonas. Thank you very much. So on today's session, we'll be speaking on topical issues that have occurred in the past month. And we'll be, for the first conversation, for the first discussion, we'll be speaking on port economics. Now, we've heard that there has been a first tranche of funding secured for the Boankra inland port. Now, the Boankra integrated logistics terminal. Now, there has been a lot of discussions. It started way back, and discussions regarding railway and all other things, and the physical construction being delayed because of procurement processes. Dr. vanDyck, I'll be happy if you could just speak on the whole economics of the inland port and the concept behind it.
Thank you. So the BILT, as it's known today, the Boankra Integrated Logistics Terminal, actually is a concession. It's a concession that has been given out to a company called the Ashanti Port Services Limited. The Ashanti Port Services Limited is made up of the Film Quality Limited and DSS Associates of South Korea. So they bid to put together this terminal that will have various facilities. It will have a container station, freight forwarders offices, reefer terminal, will have warehouses, and so many other things. And basically be connected by rail to major port cities of Takoradi and Tema. So the idea is for the integrated logistics terminal to serve the middle cities, the cities within the middle belt of Ghana, and also to serve our landlocked Sahelian neighbors, that's Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. So the idea of having this integrated logistics terminal in the middle belt, in terms of our neighbors, is good. Now, they don't have to come all the way to the south, to the ports, and deal with our ports. They can do all port processes right at Boankra. And this will help facilitate customs procedures, handling issues, and so on and so forth. So it is a good idea. It's been there since, I think, even before the Kufuor government. In the 90s, it actually started in the 1990s. I remember it started with the GSA head at that time, which was, I think, Magnus Adiko. He started the whole idea. And then Kofi Bia also took it up. And then, today we've gotten to where we are. And when the terminal was being inaugurated by current president of Ghana, he mentioned that they hope that the terminal will also create jobs for Ghanaians. So we're looking at about 3,000 direct jobs and about 6,000 indirect jobs. So personally, my opinion is the terminal is a good idea. It's in terms of logistics, it makes the movement of goods easier. It also will help to increase the competitiveness of Ghana's ports also by making movement of goods through Ghanaian ports much more easier for landlocked Sahelian countries.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Jonas, anytime we have conversations of new interventions within the maritime industry, we get to hear people complaining about loss of jobs. I'm happy Dr. vanDyck has mentioned job creation. And obviously, this is being sponsored or being funded by a private entity. What are your thoughts concerning the sponsored funding by a private entity and loss of jobs?
I think the issue of loss of jobs probably may not be.
I think you're on mute.
Sorry. I think the issue of loss of jobs may not be prominent in this case because it's even though it's a concession, it's not like a port project where technology is high on the agenda. This kind of concession is mainly for the provision of the facilities that are needed, warehouses, mostly warehouses, the storage facilities, and open storage like for containers also, and other goods, probably also for liquid bulk as well. So the concessionaires might not be directly operates the facility as you have in the case of like MPS. They will provide the facilities, people would hire it, and they would be the ones to provide the jobs. So if you look at the imaginaries, like Dr. vanDyck has just said, employment is just one of the imaginaries. The imaginaries, if I talk of imaginaries, I'm looking at what the authorities have said would become of the facility, what they expect to be the benefits. So the transport minister has mentioned that the middle belt would then be turned into an industrial hub to facilitate industrial activities, and that creates the jobs. Within the terminals, there'll be job creation as well for several people. So this kind of facility, this is one of the major benefits of such a facility. For inland container terminals, usually the main reason why they come into being is to decongest ports. And so if you look at the definition of inland ports, they have several names for it. The three key elements that makes up an inland port is the fact that it's an inland intermodal station where there can be exchange of goods from one mode to another. It must be connected to a port in the first place. Without a port, you really don't need that kind of facility. But between the port and that facility, there must be a big or high volume transport corridor. And that is why the rail was a big issue in this case. I have a few questions in my mind. I mean, like Dr. vanDyck said, this had been conceptualized way back in the 90s when we had a lot of congestion at the port and so on and so forth, so it was viable. We are doing this now after almost 20 years. Do we still have the same need? Is a question that I ask myself. Probably yes. We may still have that need for a facility like that. If we have the need, or if it is still relevant, now that the concession has been given, the commensurate transport link that's because we didn't have has caused this delay. Is it ready yet? I mean, it is one thing signing those agreements, because my worry is that a lot of these agreements were signed during an election year. And usually those kinds of agreements, most of them don't come into fruition. So if we're able to back this show of, should I call it show, that this with commitment and be able to do it, then I think we have a very good facility in place. But the major question I keep asking myself is that, well, it's an extended gateway, like Dr. vanDyck said, so you can clear your goods from Boankra and sort of come into Tema. But will it be beneficial to us if we take the same attitudes that we have in Tema to that facility? Talking about customs officers, the bureaucracy of state agencies, Standards Authority, Food and Drugs Board, all of these institutions have to be there or represented there as well, because this is basically a port as well. Now, if we transfer those same issues in Tema ports to Boankra in integrated logistics terminal, will we be doing ourselves any good? And another key issue also is the transit issue between Tema Port and the inland terminal where customs would clear that goods. How sure are we that we can secure those goods, that they will not end up in the market instead of going to Boankra? We're having it with transit goods all the way to Paga. The goods don't end up in Paga, they end up in the market. Now we have this link also from Tema to Boankra. How sure are we that the goods will not be diverted as we are seeing in the transit trade? So these are lingering questions that we need to probably ask ourselves as well.
Okay, now moving to Dr. Jonas. Jonas mentioned something important. He spoke about the timing of agreements being signed around maybe election time, and most of them not coming into fruition. Are there any important lessons to learn looking at the Volta Lake Transport Company, the inland water transport system, and also the Boankra inland ports? I think Alberta is off. Okay, then Doctor, if you can handle that for us. Dr. vanDyck. You're muted, please.
So you're talking about lessons to learn. If I got you well, lessons to learn considering our Boankra inland port and the Volta Lake.
Inland water transports.
Well, of course, you look at the timing of everything. If I go back to what Jonas was talking about, I look at the timing of the whole project. I wouldn't say that the project is outmoded per se. I'm not saying that's what Jonas said either. There are different focuses for developing some sort of inland port, right? One is to also develop a region into an economic center or an industrial center. that's one of the focuses. If you look at papers written by Rodriguez and other transport geographers, they'll tell you that you can actually develop an inland port so that you can develop the community. So if you look at the Boankra area, which is very close to Kumasi, and which seems to be the second most industrial region after Accra, one other objective would be to develop that area also. So with all these logistics facilities coming together, you could also think that people would want to also put up factories and other facilities there, because then the link between those facilities that they have and then the port now becomes a bit more seamless. I can have a factory in Kumasi, easily transport my goods to the BILT and have them by train to Tamport with very little handling. So it may not necessarily be an outmoded idea. It can also be focused on developing that particular area. With the VLTC area, and I'm not very sure what comparison you're making with VLTC, but if you're looking, if you are referring to the Impakadan issue with rail going to Akosombo and then going up, is that what you're referring to?
Now, I'm referring to the whole idea of inland water transport, looking at the whole management process, and also with this inland port, because Jonas also mentioned the fact that if we take the same attitude from the port to Boankra, it would not also be sustainable. So I'm asking if there are any managerial lessons we can also pick from there in order to actually make it better for us.
Our inland water transport originally, and you see, we also have to look at the history of things, originally wasn't necessarily set up as a profit-making venture. There was the north-south transport, and there was the east-west transport. The east-west transport was basically to get people from the eastern part to the western part, and they were not really charging them anything for that. The north-south one also was for the transport of goods. It wasn't set up with the idea; it was just a public service, and I think that kind of mentality has flowed through for many years. I think VLTC was set up probably 70s or 80s, correct me if I'm wrong. And so the same mentality has been, has gone through. It is now that the present government is looking at it more of a profit-making venture and wants to bring in some private participation. So I think this is where you can draw some comparisons. At this point in time, we are looking for ways, I think, as a people to facilitate trade and make sure trade is seamless, especially with after coming on board. We are looking for better governance or better management of our national facilities. But as you can see also, we are trying as much as possible to bring in a lot of private participation, bringing in money that the government doesn't have to take from another sector of the economy and pump into that part for these essential services.
Okay, thank you very much. So then the next conversation is on corruption. Anytime we hear maritime, we hear corruption. Anytime we hear the sea, we hear corruption. I don't know why, but today we might delve deep into it and see if we can also share our thoughts on it. The past month, Namibian president was also fingered in a corruption allegation, in where it was said that he actually instructed his close associates to embezzle millions of dollars for an electoral congress. We've also had an issue of the new Tanzanian president, President Samia, who actually also suspended the head of operations of the Port Authority. And in Nigeria, we've also heard stories of about 50% of cargo being either underdeclared, wrongly declared, or concealed. Is there anything we are doing wrong with regards to maritime governance that is aiding or facilitating corruption within the economic space? Dr. Jana, I'll pass that to you first.
Right. Thank you. Sorry, I've been going off and on the whole time. I think I'm having trouble with my internet. Um, so yes, I think we were having an informal discussion on this yesterday, and we we spoke about the culture of our professional our professionals at the various service providing institutions that we have. Um, Please, can you hear me? I'm not sure if my internet is still working or not. Okay,
Yes, we
thank
can.
you. Thank you. Yeah, so talking about corruption, I think one of the things we've been trying as a country to stamp out corruption is digitalization. And over the years, we've tried to digitalize our services, but the the whole idea of people still finding their way around the system is what baffles me, because I think the idea is that the idea we have is that when we digitalize our processes, it only goes to hasten the operations and not necessarily rule out corruption from the processes. And that's where we have to look at the will of people to actually assist in ruling out corrupt practices. And I think we have to do more as a people on a moral ground. I don't know if it's because we do not see the long-term implication of corruption in in the process, especially at the port, because it goes a long way to actually harm the cost of doing business. And I don't want to believe that we don't know that. Maybe people don't know. Maybe we may have to tackle it from that aspect where we start to hammer on what we are losing as a people from entangling in all these corrupt activities. But maybe that's the angle we may have to start tackling issues from. But I think it's an attitudinal thing, and it's either we are ignorant about its implications to the economy, or it's just we are not willing to change our ways.
Okay. I'm happy you mentioned digitalization. Dr. vanDyck, with regards to digitalization, do you think that is the solution to corruption, or we still have a poor system irrespective of the digitalized processes?
If you look at our history, especially Ghana's history, when it comes to digitalization of things, or probably in digital transformation, which probably be a more accurate thing to say, we've always people know that this may be the way to go to stamp out corruption, but the motivation to stamp out corruption is not there. And so, just like Alberta said, people would go out of their ways to find a way around it. Now, I think it's one measure that helps in reducing corruption, but it's not the only thing that would help or work within our context. In logistics, we have something we call transparency. We also use a lot of automated systems and stuff, but we talk about transparency as an organization being T-shaped and to build trust. And I feel that this is what digital transformation may be able to achieve if it's done properly. If everything is so transparent that you cannot necessarily do something in the shadows, I think that's where you see some change. But if people in one corner can manipulate the system, or do something to their own personal benefit, then you see that people start to find ways to go around issues. But if everything is so transparent, then people would be less inclined to do that. Another thing is, like Alberta said again, it's the mindset of our people. I don't want to say that we have a cultural bias towards corruption. No, we don't have that. I just think that we have nowadays tended to accept it as part of the system. Oh, people are corrupt in the ports, people are corrupt at customs, and yeah, we know that they are doing this, we know that they're doing that, and we are okay with it, but it's not okay. And people are doing things, people are getting caught, and no punitive measures are being taken against them. Nobody's getting punished. So there's no deterrent for people to say, look, I know if I do this thing and I get caught, I'm going to get in really big trouble. So sometimes the risk is not as great because there's no punitive measure.
Okay. Mr. Jonas, there are people who hold the notion that even if you introduce digitalization, it's the beneficiaries that will change and not the system. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with that to an extent. You see, Mr. vanDyck mentioned something, digital transformation. It's all of this that we're discussing is about people. It's not the artifacts. It is not the technology, not the computer systems that you put there. It's about people. You see, if you look at the WTO, the World Customs Organization's definition of what even a single window system should be, and that's what we've been implementing GCNet. Now we have ICOMS. A single window is not necessarily something that should be computer on the computer. So what they say is that it can also be a manual system. The computer only helps when the volumes are high. So assuming we were doing a manual one, all that it will boil down to is the trustworthiness of the people who are in charge of this system. And if they are not trustworthy in the manual system, they cannot be trustworthy with the computerized system. Because what some of the researchers have found out, there's a guy, a paper written by Beerman and Tete, I think from the UK. The guy spent some time with customs during the GCNet early days. And what he tells is that the corruption or the rent-seeking attitude can actually be incorporated into the system so it can be negotiated while the system is being implemented. So sometimes some people may lose out if you put those who would do the inspection and all those kinds of things may lose out at a point, but there are other people who will still gain. They gave an example of, say, a computer choosing who should inspect the goods. So the customs officers are not aware who is supposed to inspect the goods, so that they don't choose somebody who knows the importer and can have a deal with them. But customs officers have what they call esprit de corps. They know themselves. So even if it is not, I'm not the one who has been chosen, and my importer, the person I know, is the one whose goods are going to be inspected, I can still call my friend and say, Charlie, treat him well. We share the benefits. Okay, so it's all about people, and that's why we call it digital transformation. It's not the artifacts or computer or whatever per se, but it's the people who are using the system. And so you need to be aware of that. So all these corrupt activities that are surrounding Maritime, Maritime has been very conservative for a while. The technology part is only coming in usually when we talk about it, we only refer to customs. But that first example you gave about the Namibian president and the Tanzanian president dealing with the port authority, people have now become conscientized. I mean, we talked about sea blindness than last time, but this time about activities around the port has become a major concern for politicians. When politicians get into it, you see all of these things happening. Maybe sometime later we can discuss even Ghana's own history, how the port issues have become so prevalent now in society. Many years ago, nobody knew about the port. Not too many people cared about the port. But today, it looks like it's the place where everybody is seeking rent. So in that paper by Beerman and Tete, they talk about the fact that even the state sponsors these rent-seeking activities. That is why you have your FDAs, your standards authorities. There's even, I saw one that was even funny. Ghana Museums and Monuments Board imposing a charge of some pesos or so on some of the import or something of artifacts or export of artifacts or something. So it almost looks like the port has become a place where everybody wants to get some money from. You remember even recently there was something in Ghana Health Service. They said what they're going to do. What do they call it? Putting some chemicals on imported bulk goods so that whether it kills pests or whatever it is. I've forgotten the name of it. But they were building a facility in the port where they would spray some sort of chemical on imported goods so that if there's anything being imported into the country, we don't get pests or whatever from other countries coming in. But these are all ways for them to make some money out of the port. And it's becoming rampant now because every state agency is becoming an authority. And once you're an authority, you must find ways to make money to pay yourself. And so the rent-seeking attitude is not just with individuals, but there are state-sponsored ones as well. And it's becoming very prevalent. Technology, there was even a theft war with technology. If you remember, even when GCNet was in operation, Shippers Council was bringing their Aryee, then it later on became CTN on different platforms. Everybody is bringing their own technology. For what? You see, in the old developed countries in Europe, they've had very old systems. So all they need to do is to let the systems talk to each other. They don't have the luxury of setting up new systems that are be one-touch systems like what we want to do with Icons or what Icons is doing now. So they have to connect their old systems. But we are lucky, we are just starting. So we have the luxury of setting up a system that connects everybody at the same time and not everybody having their own standalone system where we need. And that was the issue with GCNet and Westbrook, where they said the systems were not really talking to each other properly. And that is when people find loopholes in the system to do this. But my last point, majorly, is that issue about who watches the watchman. That is the key issue. And Dr. vanDyck mentioned it, that nobody gets punished. So in your typical import process, the scanner says, well, you are green, you can go. The customs officer says, well, I have a discretion, I've stopped you. Pay me something or bring everything down, let's inspect everything. But where is that body of arbitration that would say this is not fair or this is fair? I mean, some of the laws probably too, we have to look at the discretionary powers that we give to some of these institutions, the head, and usually it's the head of the institution and sometimes the minister. A lot of our law says the minister has the discretion to do this, to do that, to do that. But if it's only him, where lies the fairness? So there should be some mechanism where if we know this is how the system works, these are the KPIs. If I bring you this letter, it shouldn't take you more than 6 hours or 2 hours or 4 hours. If you're going beyond that, then we know your service levels are not good enough and somebody has to step in and do something. But importers and others, they don't have that system, arbitration system, where they can have this justice. And so when somebody is cheating you or demanding, assuming a customs officer is demanding bribe from you, who are you going to report to? To his superior? I mean,
I want to ask you a question.
Jeffrey, if I could just make a quick comment.
Okay.
What Jonas was discussing right now just give me an idea about something.
Okay.
We have ports, and I think probably also corruption can be linked to the type of port governance system that we have. Right. Very loosely, this is a very loose thought. If you look at more corporatized systems that are money-making ventures, purely money-making ventures, you bring a corporatized port system, that means private sector people coming to the port and running the port like a business, purely for profit-making. Now, you tend to see, especially within Africa, you look at Port of Djibouti, which is a bit corporatized. I think this also started with the Rotterdam port as well in Europe. You see how everything now tends to go towards service levels. So there are KPIs for all deliverables. And then you have to meet those service levels. Otherwise, some corrective actions have to be taken. And if we have those service levels in place, people do not even have the time or the chance to do some of these things. Because a certain kind of service or level of service expected from you, whether you're a private organization or whether you're a regulatory agency. Because we have to understand that within the port sector, this is where we have a mix of both private, public, and even regulatory agencies, parastatal agencies coming together to perform this function. You can't have one person within that node, doing the wrong thing, because the chain is as strong as its weakest link. So if you have customs coming in and delaying everything, it affects everybody else. You can't purely say it's a customs problem. No, it's a supply chain problem. So we have to view the port as an important part of the supply chain and look at how we can integrate the port into the supply chain. And once we can get these operational aspects, policy-related aspects in check, I think we can check corruption as well.
Okay, thank you very much for your submission. I just want to ask Jonas a question. When he was speaking, something came to mind, and I just want to raise it up. He mentioned, or he alluded to the fact that within our port system, everybody wants to cash out. Is it something that happens in Africa only, or it's something that happens in the world as well?
I'm not sure about other African countries, but what you see in most developed countries is that there's one state institution that faces the public, which offers the customer service. So for instance, you've brought something that needs to be checked by a lab. Does customs have a lab? Does FDA have a lab? Do their labs do they have the capacity to do the same kind of test? If so, why is it not that customs is not allowed to do the tests and FDA stays in the background, that when the issue is beyond customs, they can escalate it to FDA? Should they be there by all means? Okay, so you'd see only one person. This is the state, and the state is represented by the border authority or border force or whatever name they give it. And so when you meet the state, this is it. But if you have to meet several organizations that represent the state, then that is when people begin to try to make something out of you. Okay, so it depends on the service being offered. If one institution can be trained to handle several of them, and I see this a lot. I mean, I talk about this program. I used to watch it a lot on DSTV, border security. If you watch this Australian airport, I mean, it's the immigration or police or wherever who is at the airport. They will do everything unless it's beyond them before they call any other backup to come and help. But they are the people facing the public, and so they handle it as much as possible. Unless they're criminal activity, then they call the police or CID or whatever, come and pick the person. But so long as they have the equipment to test and so on and so forth, they don't need multiple agencies at the same place. But the problem is the fact that now you have to make your own money to pay yourself, and that is where everybody tries to find ways to. And it's a problem of the shortage of revenue for most countries, and that's why government looks on and doesn't intervene, because he cannot pay the people in those organizations from the taxes. So if I've made you an authority and I've asked you to find your own money, then, well, even if it will obstruct trade facilitation, you are still making something out of it. But usually what we see with a lot of these institutions is that the first things you see that they build these huge head offices where they rent some of the floors to other people to make more money as well. But that's the first things you begin to see. Huge, big offices, big cars for the big men in the institution. But the services that must go to the state, the citizens, is always the same. It never changes. And there are also opportunities for them to develop the industry further and point out opportunities for investment and all that. But that aspect of development never comes in. there's always the charges and the fees and the charges and the fees, and that's the biggest problem that we face now. It's a revenue issue. Government can't support them. They need to find their own money.
Okay, thank you. We'll delve into the next topic, which has got to do with pollution. We'll speak on it on on a multifaceted aspect. We have the issue of over 60 dolphins and fishes dying or coming to shore and dying between the period of 2nd to 4th April. It happened at Axim, happened in Osu, and also happened in Keita. Now, the Vice Chancellor of the Regional Maritime University has spoken about the need for investment in marine research and capacity building, and also the constant monitoring of our coastline. GMA has also gone ahead to engage stakeholders on the Cape Town Agreement, which also stipulates the best practices for fishing at sea. Now, Dr. Weinstein, what are your thoughts regarding this particular issue, and what we can do to avert problems of this nature?
Yeah, thank you once again, Jeffrey. So I think the issue about pollution is like you said, it's a multifaceted issue that ties into a lot of things when you take the ocean, and especially when we want to link it with the recent discovery of dead fishes along our beaches. To touch on the dead fishes, and I would say that so far, well, it has been attributed to stresses, and I remember seeing a thread of messages, comments on Facebook when it was made by the minister that the death of the fishes were attributed to stresses. And I was not amazed because the level of knowledge of most people about a lot of issues related to the ocean is quite low. And the term stresses, the use of the term stress can mean a whole lot of things, apart from the stress we are used to as humans. So when we talk about stress, we are talking about any difference in what the fish is used to. It could be stress that they encountered out of difference in temperature, difference even in the noise levels in the sea, and a whole lot of things. So it was not far from right by saying the fishes were probably stressed, but we took stress out of context. And this will also bring me to that aspect of the Vice Chancellor of RMU talking about us having a research vessel. It is really necessary, and I think this request has been made over time. This is because we do not understand the ocean environment. And the reason it is so is because we do not monitor enough. We do not know what happens there. And so the slightest change, we are not able to detect it, and we are not able to explain what happens. With the dolphins, the issue of the dolphins, at the moment, we've still been able to identify what exactly the cause was. There are some speculations that are feasible, but then there isn't really a conclusion on what may have caused it. But looking at how dolphins, the nature of dolphins, they move with sound. And once they can be disoriented when the pollution of sound, the level of pollution of sound in the environment is too high for them. So some have speculated the death of those dolphins to some noise pollution, some extreme explosion or something that happened in the sea. So far, scientists working around investigating what happened have ruled out pollution that some people were attributing the death to. I am not too sure about what happened with those fishes at Usu, but like I said, stress could be anything, and we will not be able to understand fully if we have not been monitoring what goes on in the sea and know what might have changed. So the call for more research in the ocean environment is a serious call, and I think we should all um, make this noise wherever we find ourselves or whatever platform we get. We need it. We need it to improve our knowledge about the ocean. And as we go on, I'll talk more about our commitment to the ocean. And I'm excited about it because our president is leading um, the whole idea of looking more to the ocean and changing our attitude towards the ocean. So maybe I'll touch on that as we go on.
Yeah, I'll come to you, then you can speak more of that. You can delve deep into it.
Yeah.
Dr. vanDyck, Alberta mentioned something interesting. We do not understand the ocean and we don't know what happens in the ocean. There are some people who also hold the thought that most of the pollution within the ocean is also land-based pollution and ship source pollution. What are your thoughts regarding the waste in the ocean and also the management of waste? Recently, we also had we heard in the news the past month that fishermen just around Sagoe village went out to fish, and instead of getting fish, they came back with a lot of plastic. You understand? So it changes the whole conversation with regards to the sources of pollution within our water bodies. And I want you to delve into it.
Okay, thank you. The first issue, the issue of us not being aware of what's happening in the ocean. Mr. Aryee always talks about this in our conversations. He calls it sea blindness, and I agree with him. Our economies are so dependent on the sea, but it's quite apparent that we don't really understand how important the sea is to us. And maybe this is where probably on a larger scale, the maritime sector has not really done enough to put this information out there. In his last submission, Mr. Aryee mentioned that, people have been given a mandate, for example, the Ghana Maritime Authority, to regulate the maritime sector, but there's also a mandate to promote the maritime sector. And this is something that they need to step up. Do more promotion. People need to understand the ocean, and probably let's even talk about the blue economy, the economy of the sea and what the sea, the benefits the sea can bring to us, but benefits also in the context of sustainability. And so yes, in my opinion, we are pretty blind to the sea, and we need to do a bit more in getting people to understand how important the ocean is to our economy, how important the ocean is to our lives and our livelihoods. And I think that will go a long way to us tackling a lot of these issues that you've mentioned. You talked about pollution in the sea. I remember in 2012, my wife was undertaking her master's degree, and I was assisting her as her own research assistant to go to the field and do some work. I'm not a scientist, but what I remember was, we drew out something called a transect belt, which was, I think, 1,000 meters square, and then we would wait and collect rubbish on a weekly basis, weigh it, and classify it, and so on and so forth. And Myself being a transport person, I was amazed at the amount of rubbish we were getting within that transect belt every week. And the kinds of rubbish, the number of car tires that we had to pick out on a weekly basis. I said, how many tires are in the sea? And this is just probably a particular beach. And we did this for 4 different locations across Accra and Tamale. And from her study, she found that a lot of the rubbish was actually coming from land. And you could see that the solution to this crisis was not just collection of rubbish on land, but it was an attitudinal thing again. Most of our things come down to attitude. People are in their homes and they take rubbish and just throw it out in the street. It rains, they get washed into streams and find their way into the sea. People have storm drains at the back of their homes. They just chuck rubbish into it and then ends up in the sea. And this has become a serious issue. We know how it's affecting us with our floods. For example, when you come to the Regional Maritime University beach, we have a very serious problem with trash from land being washed into the sea and then also now getting spread onto our beach. It's an attitudinal thing. People need to understand the effects of what they are doing. Otherwise, it's not going to change. Another major rubbish type that you find is plastics. And I think we need our policy change towards plastics. Plastics take long to degrade in the environment. And I think that it's about time the government started to look at banning plastics in Ghana if we are going to solve our pollution problem here. So these are the few things I think in the way of finding solutions to our coastal pollution, especially, and the sea blindness. These are the few things I think we can do as a country.
Okay. I like the fact that you kept hammering on sea blindness. Alberta also did same and attributed that to Jonas. With Jonas, with the whole idea of sea, most people don't feel the impact of the ocean in their lives because, or don't feel it directly because they feel like they are far away from the coastline, or they are far away from the coast, so they are not affected in any way by the activities within the coastal and within the regions. What is your concept on sea blindness, and what is the way forward with regards to ocean literacy? Looking at the fact that even the air we breathe, the quality of the air we breathe is also affected by, is also impacted by the ocean.
Well, I mean, that idea is quite big. The fact that the sea is a place of industry. If we look at all the territorial areas that have been claimed by Ghana as part of a territorial seas, contiguous zone, EEZ, I can safely say that area probably can be bigger than the size of the land part of Ghana. So if you have your land part giving you a certain quantity of GDP or economic value, then you can imagine what the sea part would give you, which is much bigger. You have fishing going on, you have transportation going on, you have oil exploration. There's potential for wind and wave energy harnessing. I mean, there's water sports, tourism, so much that can be gained from that ocean expanse. But how many of these activities are we really involved in? The international transportation of goods is not in our hands. It's in the hands of the big boys, Maersk Line and all these big shipping companies. We earn nothing from those people. Fishing, which is probably local. You also have, we've always had the Koreans and Chinese coming in, stealing our fish and do those kinds of things. The fishing industry has a lot of issues. The local industry has not developed in any way. The technology has not developed. The vessels, boats are still the same boats, and so on and so forth. When it comes to holidays, people want to find a place to go to to sit with their family and have some nice time. The first place most people think about is the beach. In Ghana, we don't have parks. There are no parks in the city. Where are you going to relax? Your best bet is to go to some hotel. The hotels in Ghana are more rented to business than accepting families. There's nothing your children can find there to do. No playgrounds for kids, nothing. So most people just look to the coast. And that is why Easter Monday and all these holidays, you find people at the beaches trying to have fun. But gradually, all these spaces are also becoming private spaces. So there are no public spaces for people to go and do those things anymore, because we keep giving them to private people too. And that is one of my fears for a lot of our beaches. The parts that are public, we cannot keep them clean. When you give it to a private person, yeah, to be kept clean, but you have to pay to enter the place to have some good time. And that's what the authorities must look at. But like we're saying, this pollution that is coming to the beaches, it's nothing to do with something from the sea. It's land source, as we've talked about. But it looks like all the solutions that we keep seeing is not tackling it from the roots. I have opened a lot of, this evening I tried to Google beach cleaning in Ghana. It's a lot of NGOs doing beach cleaning, plenty of them. I mean, and you don't see any state agency leading the charge in keeping the coast clean. And you cannot keep it clean because you have to do it every time, because the thing is coming from a source which you haven't tackled. So we haven't brought into the conversation the local authorities and all. I mean, when you talk to authorities like that, they rather keep complaining than to tell you what they can do to solve the problem. So if everybody is complaining, then who is going to solve the problem? So you talked about attitudinal change, but for me, it's enforcement. I mean, people will always be who they are, but if they are paying for their sins, they will think twice before that their natural attitude comes up. So the local authorities, and I mean, I think mostly we have nationalized everything. It's so centralized that we leave the DCs and the local authorities, we let them go scot-free when they are not doing their jobs. Rubbish is one of the biggest problems in most countries, but it's also one of the areas that there's a lot of money. Garbage management is a lot of money. People are going into recycling and all kinds of things. And most local authorities, that is one of their biggest jobs, to manage waste. And if we can't do that one, what else can we do? So there's a lot to be done outside the arena of maritime or the maritime sector. But the problem is not really from there. There's a little bit of that, I mean, with spillages from ships and all that. I mean, those are things that people don't see, so people don't talk about. But when it comes to the rubbish and the things we see on the beach, and sometimes the seaweed and all those kinds of things, but the plastics and all that, we know where they're coming from, but we are not tackling it from the source.
Okay.
Maybe the fishermen,
Now, Alberta,
if they are catching,
Jonas may... Okay.
Jeffrey, sorry.
Go on.
If the fishermen are catching plastics now, maybe they should go into that business of catching plastics and selling them to some recycling plants. Maybe they'll make much more money than fishing.
Interesting. Alberta,
Talk to me, Jeffrey.
Jonas mentioned something interesting as well. He mentioned that there are a lot of activities we can derive from the ocean. Lots of activities. And from his conversation, you can see that we are not, as a people, we are not fully exploring and exploiting the potential of the ocean. What can be done with regards to ocean literacy, and what are you also doing with regards to literacy?
Okay. So I'm glad to announce that we are in the UN decade, the UN Global Ocean Decade. So, yeah, so this is a 10-year period set aside by the United Nations, by UNESCO, sorry, and it is led by IOC UNESCO. And for the period between 2021 and 2030, the strategy is to utilize ocean science to attain sustainable development. So with the sea blindness issue we've been talking about all evening, the idea is that people do not know too much about the ocean, especially like George mentioned initially. People who are not so close to uh, the sea, or I think it was Jonas who mentioned that, I'm not sure. But people who are quite distant from the sea think they are not necessarily affected by what goes on in the coastal area or in the ocean. So this global ocean decade seeks to actually educate people, use ocean science to achieve sustainable development. So we have just entered the ocean decade, and for me, I'm very excited about it because then we are trying to put ocean conversations where we want to understand how our interaction with the ocean is, how we impact on the ocean, how the ocean impacts on us. And one of the strategies that most coastal nations are looking at to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic is to develop their activities related to the ocean. And that's what brings about this blue economy uh, discussion that has become quite popular nowadays. So the whole idea is that the ocean has much more to offer us than we are actually exploiting at the moment. And even what we are benefiting now, we are not able to manage it well. And so what happens when we start going into other things? So this ocean decade thing, I think, is a very serious phenomenon that should be addressed properly. And as the sea gets busy and activities start springing up, more activities than we are used to now start springing up, there would be a lot of conflicts. The issue of space comes in play because a few years back, before 2007, Ghana was not exploiting oil. Fishermen were free to use any part of the ocean as they wish. But then we found oil, and then suddenly we became an oil drilling nation. Then what happened to our fisher folk? I don't think anyone ever sat down to think about the conflicts that would possibly arise from such a venture. So there is so much about the ocean, and I'm glad also again to announce that Ghana's president is fronting this whole idea of turning to the ocean. Uh, Someone made a joke that we don't appreciate the ocean because most of our buildings are faced backwards towards the ocean. So we don't even turn to see the ocean. That's why we don't appreciate it. But slowly we are turning our attention to the ocean, and the president was part of the high level panel for transformation in the ocean. Let me get that name right. Um, so the name is the High Level Ocean Panel. I think those who are interested would want to have a look at it. So a 14-member panel has been set up, and Ghana is one of them amongst 3 other African countries. And their idea, which I find very interesting, is to have 100% sustainability within their ocean space by the year 2025. And I ask myself, wow, we are in 2021. How are we magically going to have complete sustainability of our ocean space by 2025? And putting all these 14 countries together, they hope to sustainably manage 30 million square kilometers of the ocean that is under their national jurisdictions. This is a huge, how do I put it? It's a huge task, okay? And so I was also asking myself, what would be the necessary steps to take to achieve this Herculean task? Because obviously, when I just look at even one sector of the ocean, for example, as we are talking about even shipping, if we are talking about how we can maximize the shipping economy alone, look at how it is plagued with a lot of issues. We've not even spoken about fisheries. We've not spoken about tourism, which has to do with massive pollution as well. You know, I look at all this and I ask myself, wow, how are we going to do it? How are we going to achieve sustainable oceans by 2025? And that's where ocean literacy comes to mind. Okay, and ocean literacy is at the core of the decade, the UN Ocean Decade we have. So literacy on all levels, literacy at the basic level, literacy among agencies, literacy everywhere about the ocean. And when we take even the coastal areas, whether they understand their interaction with the oceans is one question. Then we move inland, we go up north. How is someone's cutting of trees, okay, possibly linked to ocean health? Is there a connection? Do they know? So all this goes into ocean literacy, and it's a huge opportunity. Aside the educational aspect, there is also the capacity building. There is also the job creation aspect, because we are talking plastics. How are we building the capacities of young people to go into recycling of plastics? You know, we are talking about, okay, let's bring it back home to shipping. We are talking about building our shipping economy as a way of boosting our blue economy. How is I think I heard on the news recently that the Tema shipyard had issues, and I stand to be corrected, but I think I heard something like that, and it was people were going to lose their jobs because it was going to be shut down.
So the good news about that as well is that they've also got some investments too. So then, but that's a conversation for later.
Yeah, but that's it. It's good they've got some investment to bring it up, but this is the issue where we even have our shipyard having been at the edge of shutting down. You see, so these are a whole lot of things. I personally thought the 2025 was a bit too ambitious. But the first thing we have to look at is a strategy on how we are going to do this. And the strategy has to be led by an institution, by an organization, by an agency. And in this strategy, we have to seriously think about what the immediate steps would be. Would it be a massive education about the oceans? Will we take ocean literacy in a different level where we even incorporate some of these discussions in our curricula in the schools? At what level? Is it starting from the basic level? Is it from the high school level or from the universities? So these are some things I think that are basic we can start with. And if we really, really want to get this achieving 100%, not 20%, not 50%, 100% by 2025, then we really have a lot to do. And I think a practical way would be to sit down, have a strategy. It doesn't have to be a very fancy or complicated one, but something very little to start with, as basic as having a good ocean literacy strategy that is basic enough, that can be appreciated at every level across the country, not limited to coastal areas or universities that have marine courses, but then it should be widespread enough. I think that would be my submission for now. I'll come in with other things.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, Dr. vanDyck, she kept hammering on ocean literacy. And for someone who is new to the maritime industry, they would also hear things like blue economy. Now, I know it's something you have campaigned for years. Is there any key distinction between blue economy and the term ocean literacy? And also, with regards to the sustainable use of the ocean by 2025, what are your thoughts? Are there any key strategies you can actually suggest apart from a national policy or a national campaign? Muted. It's muted if you can hear me.
Yes, I was saying these are very hot questions. Well, like Alberta said, the 2025 thing is really ambitious, and I don't think it's achievable. It's just unachievable. But it's good to set the limit very high. So, like you say, when you fall, you still fall quite high. So it's a good thing. I think we need a national maritime policy. And that's a good place to start. There's a fundamental difference between ocean literacy and blue economy. The whole idea of a blue economy is to take advantage of the ocean, or I don't use the word exploit, but use the ocean's resources to your advantage, but using them sustainably. And this is what countries need to do. The first step is to come up with a national maritime policy, which will detail the sectors that you can take advantage of with the resources that you have. It will also talk about the agencies and the ministries and the government sectors, both the public sector, the private sector, how they'll come together and take advantage of this. The blue economy consists of a lot of things. It's not just for traditional ports or shipping. You have, even for landlocked countries, you have a blue economy. It can be an inland lake, that has fish in the lake. That can be used for tourism. That can be used for fishing. That could be used for underwater mining or, underwater kind of recreational activities. The blue economy also covers big pharma, because you do get some pharmaceutical products from the sea. It could be from organisms in the sea, whether they are benthic or pelagic organisms. It covers so many things, and you need to have that maritime policy in place, first of all, to govern the activities, to make sure that we are doing things in a sustainable manner. That's the first step. And in Ghana, I know the Ghana Maritime Authority they've organized a few workshops, and it's something that they are considering seriously to come up with. But it's an inter-agency sort of thing, an inter-agency cooperation. The only way it will work is if you're working with different sectors. For example, let's take the Volta Lake. Let's assume we want to develop blue economy strategy for the Volta Lake. So how are we going to develop the Volta Lake? What are the prospective things we can do? If you look at the Volta Lake, what comes to mind is, apart from the ordinary transport that we see happen in the Volta Lake, you can also see tourism. You have a lot of hotels dotted around the Volta Lake. You have water sports activities going on there. We could have events, racing events, speedboat racing. You could have zip lines going from islands on the Volta Lake to So there are so many things we could do. We could probably find out that, we could find minerals within the Volta Lake. It could be oil, it could be gold, it could be other things. But how do we do this sustainably? That's the key thing. How do we do this sustainably? And that is what different agencies, that's what the government needs to sit down and look at and tell themselves, we want to take advantage of the resources that the blue economy can offer our country, but we want to do that sustainably. And to ensure that people are getting jobs, we ensure that people's livelihoods are ongoing, we ensure that our economies are expanding. I think in Africa, Kenya has taken the lead on this. They've had quite significant conferences ongoing. They're putting policies in place. Other countries are doing the same. And I think Ghana needs to get up from this slumber we're in right now. We do now look like we're not very serious with our environmental issues because of what is going on with the small-scale mining and illegal mining issues and how we've destroyed our water bodies. We need to get up from all these negative issues right now and start taking the lead like we've done in the past on some of these things. We do have the expertise. We have University of Cape Coast, we have University of Ghana, KNUST, we have academics who are well trained in these areas. We can put together good policy, including the Regional Maritime University, put together some very good policies and start taking advantage of what the blue economy has to offer.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, we've all heard from Alberta the pledge by the president for the sustainable use of the ocean by 2025. It's not seem to be popular. It doesn't seem to be popular. It's not been popularized yet. I think personally feel that it's also being overambitious. Jonas, I also want to hear your thoughts, looking at what everyone has shared with regards to their thoughts on the president's pledge.
Yeah, definitely overambitious. I'm not sure even this plastic thing we talked about, land-based source of pollution, that will not even be solved within these 5 years, to talk about all the other issues that are part of this whole ocean discussion. It's really big. I mean, and I like the fact that you talk about the ocean literacy and try to connect it with the blue ocean thing. And like Dr. vanDyck has said, it's massive. The industries that they need to come together, the agencies, the multi-sectorial approach, it's big. There are a few maritime authorities in Africa who are taking steps like that. So if you see the South African Maritime and Safety Authority, now they go even down to primary schools, if you talk about ocean literacy, to start talking about these things. And we haven't taken advantage of a lot of the things that sometimes international organizations even offer. I know IMO, for instance, had what they call the Maritime Ambassador Program. You didn't need to pay anything as a country. You only needed to nominate somebody who would lead the charge. And that ambassador is the one supposed to lead in this literacy thing. Ghana never nominated anybody. If you nominate, you're not supposed to pay anything. The IMO takes over your travels, your everything. They take, but we didn't nominate anybody. I think I once wrote to the Maritime Authority there's a form and all that, but they need to endorse and nominate you. And nobody minded me. I don't think I also pushed enough. But if we are really serious about it, we could have started these things long time ago. And I mean, if you look at, there's some sectors that we don't even talk about, like telecommunication. Because there are telecom cables or data cables running through all these parts of the sea. You have West African gas pipeline, all these kinds of things. But they don't even come into the conversation yet. So I'm not sure what Alberta was the name of the thing the president signed. I'm not sure what it entails. What they mean by sustainable.
It's a high-level ocean panel.
Yes, and what they mean by sustainability by 2025. What's I don't know what the KPIs are and what targets they need to meet, but it's huge. And some of these issues are transnational because sometimes what happens in one country affects the other. So on what basis are you going to measure your attainment of 100%? Is it, I mean, because if you build a port in Ghana, wave action in another country changes, several things changes. Are you going to measure it by individual states or by a regional level thing? And that brings us to another issue of that the absence of a regional body, that kind of, even if countries are trying, that regional body could encourage, could push them with their own policies that they've set, the things that they want to be judged by. But right now, MOCA, the Maritime Organization of West and Central Africa, is in comatose. I mean, people are not even aware that they exist anymore. So there's a huge gap that is left. If you see what we are doing in comparison to what, say, the Europeans are doing, it's they do it on a continental basis or regional basis, and they check themselves so that you don't have multiple. And we are seeing that even in the port industry, where there's a big competition that is coming from the private sector. Everybody is building huge ports, deepening the ports, and so on and so forth, trying to be the so-called hub ports. But where would that end? At the end of the day, somehow we may probably end up with some white elephants because we are all importing the same things, we are exporting the same things, and it's not like we are doing it for a niche market. We are all competing for the same things. But if you see what the European Ports Authority do and those kind of, sometimes they even give monies to certain countries to set up ports, not to serve on a regional basis, but maybe a localized area and so on and so forth. So, and nobody complains that why are you giving money to this and not giving it to me? I also need to expand my ports or whatever. But the fact is that that port can serve several other countries. And we suffer for some of these things because there's a connection between the intermodalism, the logistics part, the road sector, the rail that is absent in connecting our countries. It's also part of the problem. That is why these things are going on. So we talk of the sea, but there's a link to land as well. So assuming there was good rail connection between all the West African states and good road connections, some of the goods will probably end up in Nigeria and be economically transported to other countries than for another ship to take it to another country. But we don't have that situation here. And that's why, if you see what the Europeans do, the Rotterdam port, which is in Holland, serves probably greater parts of Germany than what Hamburg or Bremerhaven would even do, because the connections are there. Pipelines are going, the rail is going, big road corridor. And so it's also economical to serve it from another country, and they see themselves as one. But the competition we are having now, in theory, we say we are trying to build a global village, an ECOWAS, where, and with AFTA, we are looking at one common market. But in practice, there's serious competition that is destroying. So it looks like at a high level, they seem that they want to be one, showing something. But when it comes to practice and what the commercial people do and what the operations people do, it's not in sync with that objective at all. And we may end up with certain facilities that maybe white elephants.
Okay, thank you. Our final issue will be centered on port security. When we were having our conversation early on the issues regarding corruption, we spoke about Nigeria and about 50% of cargo being smuggled, either also being underdeclared or concealed. Quite recently, Nigerian customs intercepted about 42 grams of carbide, which was being smuggled through Benin. And you also see from Gambia that they've actually invested by engaging a private consulting security company for 3 months to also help them uplift their security outlook and also be able to upgrade themselves in line with ISPS standards. This Jonas, what are your thoughts concerning Africa's maritime and port security, and what do you think we are doing right, or what do you think we are doing wrong?
Right or wrong? That's a big question. But in terms of security, like you said, I mean, the ocean is big. it's huge. Let's start. You start with like we usually say, the low hanging fruit. When it comes to the high seas, as we know in maritime law, know that it's an area that is big. It's hard to control. We saw it with how there's piracy issues in Somalia and all that. These are huge areas. And how many ships or boats will you need to patrol these kinds of places? I mean, luckily enough, if it's close to the coast, you have surveillance that you can use by technology. But start with what is close to you. Anybody who goes to sea lives from a spot on the coast, either from a beach or a port. If you don't have control of those places, then once they move into the water, it's hard for you to control anything there. And it adds to the reason why people are afraid to do any investments on the sea and just see all these sea blindness issues. I remember one of our friends tried to convince some rich people in Ghana to buy boats, and they tell you they don't even know what is happening on that water. I mean, they have no control over that place, so they won't put their money there. You see, so in terms of security, start with what is close to you, the low-hanging fruit. People leave the coast and enter the water, but nobody can account for them. Somebody goes and he doesn't come home. Unless the family reports, nobody would know. There's no mechanism. One time I was amazed with some Australian thing that I watched, where the people do recreational fishing. So they go and catch fish from a certain water body. But even there were security people who would check the size of the fish you caught. If it's not big enough or whatever measurement they measure it. You have to put it back in the water. So they open the ice chest and check and count. You see, these are people who are serious about issues. You go to our coast, people do a lot of things there. If a ship bets on the water and a fishing boat goes there and picks all this cocaine or whatever thing and what the gallons or barrels of whatever the Nigerian Navy intercepted, and they arrive at a beach. I mean, who controls the beaches in Ghana? Even the ports. I don't know, but I haven't seen a port where so many people enter in my life, like go in and out everywhere. So many people. It's just crazy. A place where there are heavy duty equipment moving and then human movement all over the place. I think MPS, at least their terminal, they try to separate human from machines. And so they put ways where you can pass and all these kinds of things. But you don't see that in some parts of the port. And it's that area, especially our fishing harbor area, it's a mess. Like it's a fishing harbor, but it's also like a market already. Like for fishmongers, everybody is in there. You pay something at the gate and you enter. I mean, is it a money-making venture for a port for you to pay money to enter a port? You only have to go into a port when you have serious business there. See, so it's right from where you can control. If you lose it, once you enter the water, it's difficult. The Navy, I mean, the first issue they had as a Navy was the fact that they didn't have prosecutory powers. You can only arrest somebody and give it to the police. The Navy can't, they are military people, they can't prosecute anybody in court. We had that same issue with even the piracy issue, the Somalis. And you arrest them, what's the jurisdiction, who prosecutes them? Then we try to form the Marine Police. But the Marine Police, what resources do they have? They bought them boats. I see the boats parked on land, not on water, because they can't even afford to buy fuel. But when the president comes to visit, they show it, they put it on water. I mean, you don't show your real situation. I can liken it to, I mean, sometimes I make a joke out of it. Our secondary school science labs. They keep the lab equipment in the storeroom. It's only when there's an exhibition they bring the proper ones out. But the one when we have to use it, you don't give it to us. So we don't show whitewash things, and then we don't show the real character of the issues that we have. So, I mean, you still see the Navy in action doing the job. I don't hear Marine Police have arrested or done anything to anybody before. I don't even know how many personnel they have. So, like I'm saying, I think my main point is the fact that tackle the low-hanging fruits, be able to secure your costs, know who is going out and who is coming in. If you're not able to do that, when you get in the open seas, you can hardly manage anybody there. The drugs would come, people will steal our fish, all sorts of things would happen, and we would turn a blind eye to it. We have the technology somehow, but even the fisheries people, what do they call it? AIS, automated identification systems. That small boats, they don't have them. So you can't sit in the office and know that, oh, this boat is here, this boat is here, this boat is here. And the issue Alberta talked about, spatial planning. If big ships are running over small boats, who will even see? Nobody would know. You will just kill you and pass. And nobody can report it because nobody knows that you've gone out there in the sea. So we really need to ensure that what is close to us, the low-hanging fruits, we secure those places.
Okay, you have expanded the conversation, which I love. You've actually introduced the concept of fishes, checking the size of fishes, and also surveillance and all that. So then, Alberta, I'm coming to you. What are we doing with regards to food security, with regards to the fish industry, the fishing industry? What are we doing with regards to securing it for the indigents, making sure that they are not actually being exploited in an illegal manner that would also hinder the progress of our industry?
Yeah, I think this issue has been a big problem for the sector to tackle, and it brings us straight back to the illegal, unreported. What's the other one? Unregulated fisheries. Yes, thank you. Regulated, reported, illegal. It's all got to do with enforcement, which Jonas rightly said. What haven't we tried? We've tried putting fisheries officers on board. We've tried using the Ghana Navy, the Marine Police to check all of these things. And like Jonas rightly said, they are under-resourced. They are doing their best, they are under-resourced. When they even go ahead to make arrests, there are no punitive actions taken towards these people. You arrest someone, the next day there is a call. Not the next day is even too far away. The next minute, and it gets me scared because we stand on one platform to talk about how we want to fight illegal fisheries. There's so much invested into fighting illegalities at sea. But then we find it's like eating the carrot and still checking whether it has the same length. We still, that will to stamp it out, we are refusing to exercise it. Now, I wouldn't say we shouldn't pretend we don't know what to do. We know what to do. And like Jonas said, if we don't stop the activities on land, you see, at sea, the best we can do is to stop certain things on land and prevent it from going to where we cannot even reach out to. Who checks the size of fish that is brought ashore? It's not like we do not have people to check these things. But then the agents we have put, most of the fishes that are landed by foreign vessels who are not even supposed to fish within the territorial seas. They bring fishes that are usually caught within these areas and they get away with it. Whoever questions them why they land such fishes? And these are all things that we don't know. It's not like we do not know the implications on future generations. Now in 2021, we are catching plastics. What are we catching in 2025 if we do not wake up and do something about what is going on? And it goes. I don't want to take it into the political arena, but I think it really boils down to political will of our leaders to allow the systems that they themselves have put in place to work. It's as simple as that. If you happen to speak to the fishmongers who actually take over the whole fishery business after the fish has been landed, you will hear amazing stories that will sadden your heart. Okay, their power over the kind of fish. I remember when there was this campaign amongst the fish traders not to purchase psycho fish, which actually, when translated, it means bad fish. Okay, they agree not to purchase these fishes to sell, and then because they actually take loans for the men to go out at sea, and because the men are not catching enough fish, and they have to pay back loans and other costs they have incurred, they end up going back to buy these fishes and selling them on the market. So you have one person saying that, okay, this fish you brought is not good, I'm not buying it. And then the next person has bought it. What do? You lose out. So we should have a common fighting spirit against this if we really want to go somewhere. If it's no, it's no. And it's no for everybody across the 4 coastal regions that we have in the country. It should be same. Otherwise, I really don't see us changing anything. I don't see us changing anything. And the fisheries issue is actually really scary because we keep saying it. I think we've not actually realized how scary it is. Because look at your diet for the past 1 week. And I don't know how many of you ate something without fish, be it your shit or be it, there is some element of fish somewhere in our diet. Then you put that aside, we come to the number of people involved in the fishing business. Aside those who even just go to sea to bring it, those who help in pulling the nets in, all these people are parts and their livelihoods depend on it. Maybe we've not appreciated the level of the level of harm we'll be causing ourselves when we allow our fisheries to collapse. And I keep saying we know what to do. We should do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. vanDyck, can you hear me, please?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. We are now having an extended conversation on security now, so now it's maritime security. Over the years, we've heard of attacks, cyber attacks, and all that on MEST, CMA, CGM, and quite recently, Bourbon also confirmed a cyber attack. Now, you realize that most of these attacks are technological. What do you think we can do to position ourselves to avert any potential technological attack in Africa or in Ghana especially? And also with regards to our embracement of technology, we realize that a lot of times we are actually fighting against introduction of technological interventions. Do you think these fights can come back to bite us?
I think probably in our part of the world and in most other parts of the world, people are very averse to change. So when introducing new technology into a place, you always have that fear. And that's why the change management process is important. If you look, for example, at our port sector, when Terminal 3 was being developed and the change management process that MPS was managing with GPHA, one of the first things they had to do was to get the stakeholders on board so that they understood, first of all, the changes they were bringing into place and why those changes were necessary. They had various reasons, from streamlining operations to anti-graft activities and so on and so forth. So you need, first of all, when you're making these fundamental changes to the way you do things or bring in new technology, you need to bring people on board, you need to understand. And that way, you sort of legitimize what you're doing. The port, especially in the shipping industry, the port community or the community has to be part of that change process. Now, with technologies themselves, cyber attacks, unfortunately, I'm not a cyber security expert, but I have heard of blockchain technologies. I don't know if blockchain technologies, maybe someone else could expand that, but I have heard that one of the ways to deal with such issues is through blockchain technologies. You can see, let me digress a bit, even in our banking sector, I've noticed recently that banks are investing a lot in is it called internet security officers or something like that, people that deal with their technology security officers that deal with security issues. There's a lot of hacking going, there's a lot of fraud issues going on, and I think the maritime industry has to realize that our industry has such dire impacts on economies, such that if something wrong goes on, the ripple effect can be felt in many places. If, for example, Maersk Line's hacking attack that happened a couple of years ago, they had to stop operations because almost all their offices in the world are using the same system. And what happens to ships coming in? What happens to their terminals? What happens to their workers? You know? And this was the largest container shipping company in the world at the time, or still is. What happens then? Everything just comes to a halt. So this is something that the shipping industry is taking very seriously recently, and all these technologies are coming up to deal with these hacking issues and bringing it down to our national level in our port sector. I think these are things that we also have to take seriously because, for example, if our port gets hacked and they can't have access to their systems, what happens then? We've brought in technologies, but we have to ensure the technologies have the right security as well. So the port gets hacked, ships can't berth, the technology used to assign berths, the technology used to, do the ship to shore transfers and so on and so forth. What happens then? So once we're bringing in all these technologies to streamline operations, to facilitate the movement of cargo, we should also seriously think about safeguarding all these new technologies we're bringing in so that we don't rather disrupt the system. We should always have a backup plan. So that probably will be my submission about the cyber attacks.
Okay. Thank you very much. Now, Jonas, over to you. Dr. vanDyck has clearly addressed the question, and the reason why I actually mentioned this to all of us, the reason why I actually mentioned it, we seem to have an agenda to push digitalization processes within the port industry. You realize that COVID too has also forced most of these shipping lines to also go digital. Now we keep pushing the digital agenda, and no one seems to be talking about protection. You understand? So then he asked a legitimate question: what happens when the port gets hacked? What happens when items get hacked? What happens when the shipping lines also get hacked? How would we actually be able to avert all these? Now, Doctor said blockchain may be the solution. What do you think when it comes to these security issues, technological security issues, breaches and all that? Blockchain may be the solution. What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I don't think I have any other alternative suggestion. I've also heard about blockchain. And the only thing I want to say is that, well, because of this, you cannot stay back and say you want to remain in the Stone Ages, because gradually we talk about globalization. The logistics industry is also globalizing somehow. You've heard about Maersk Line's trade net. All the big boys have signed up onto it. They are gradually roping in customs authorities in various countries. So to get to a point, you'll probably be running the same system all over the world. Um, and if you are outside of that, then you're going to have problems, because if you see the strategies of all these shipping lines, they are doing backward and forward integration, horizontal and vertical integration. So they're controlling the terminals, they're controlling the transportation, they're into tracking, they're into all sorts of businesses that are connected with the original businesses. So, and the customers even belong to them. That is why that issue about what do you call it, public-private partner concessions in Africa is funny. Because if you want to remain a service port as a governance system, or you give it to a local terminal operator, the thing is that these big boys, they also have their customers. And that's why in concession agreements, they say you can actually put in agreements that the terminal should do this a certain number of TEUs per month or per year or whatever. And they sign up to those because they are confident. They have the big importers and the big exporters in their fold. So they have the whole chain. So if you're not part of it, then you're going to be left behind. So we will still have to implement these technologies. But as in life, if you live your life one time in your house, you get a robbery, it sets you back a few days. You get back on track again. It happened to Maersk Line. They shut down for a few days. They are back again. So it will happen, definitely. We're developing security systems for technology, but there's somebody also smarter who would do something, and we need to go back again and then secure the systems. So those things would happen, but what it means is that you must have backup systems to. I mean, fortunately for us, our volumes in trade and all those kinds of things, we can actually do it manually, but it's the human attitude that prevents us. And like we've discussed before, what we have now is purely digitalization. It's not digital transformation yet. We've only transferred a manual system to an electronic system. It's the transformation of mind and attitude and all that hasn't changed yet. So for us, we can actually do a manual system and it will still work because the volumes are really not big enough to use technology. But I mean, like I said before, we need to be part of the global system. The interruptions may come, but surely whoever puts anybody who signs up to things like that always make sure that there's a security backup to it. The financial world, I mean, if anybody would disrupt anything or want to steal something, it should have been the banking system, not shipping or logistics. So if they are secure, then definitely we don't have much to worry.
Okay, thank you very much. Now our 2 hours is up, but then before we leave, I have a question for all of us. What, for Jonas, you first, what are your expectations for the maritime industry in 2021?
2021. Well, I mean, the first thing is that for as a country, I'll start from the country. No, maybe let's start from the Africa level. Africa-wise, we have the aims. What was the date? The year?
2030 or 2050?
Yeah, I think it's 2030.
2030, yeah. So, I mean, every policy that we do as a country, and I think the same happens in most African countries, you start drawing all your resources from international ones, and then you draw and come down. So you start with the international conventions or policies at the international level. You come to regional level and so on. Some of the objectives or the aims that the what do you call it, Africa Union sets, well, it's not all that can be achieved, though. For instance, the common exclusive maritime zone, SEMSA. Nobody even talks about it anymore. Even national EEZs, we can manage. And to talk about a common one for the whole Africa, we are not there yet. I don't think we can achieve that in any decade. But I don't think that at that level also there's enough push. Because if you look at the piracy issue that's happening along West Africa, even the one around Somali, I didn't see the African Union active in that regard. It was Europeans who took over and handled it. The same thing we are seeing in West Africa. I mean, we understand that, yes, they have interest here. The vessels belong to them. The terminal operators are from Europe. And so they have an interest to protect. And so they are here to help. But the African Union itself is not playing any role in helping to solve this menace of piracy and armed robbery at sea. So at that level, I'm not very confident. I mean, I think a lot of people in Africa don't see the AU as a very potent organization. So we probably stop talking about it or forget about it altogether. At the regional level, at ECOWAS, for instance, ECOWAS is big, 15 countries. The East African countries are only 3 or 4. So usually they are much stronger in implementing things than ECOWAS does. ECOWAS needs to be much stronger. I think there's a little bit of problem with this French and English speaking things somehow. But at that level also, it looks like the focus is more on road transport with their, Trans-ECOWAS, Lagos, Abidjan road project thing. When it comes to sea and even the piracy issue, they've also not commented, they've not had any action going on. We have the After Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement thing also coming up. And even in that regard also, we've been talking about having a coastal service for Africa for a long time. ECOWAS itself had tried with EcoMarine, it didn't work. I think they've sat back. The Nigerian Chamber of Commerce, they still have it, they have a website, but for years, they've still not been able to raise the money to start that project yet. I'm not confident it will go on because if there was money to be made, if there was real potential there, the private guys, the big boys would have already started on that route already. It's probably not going to happen. And then we come down to our own country. I think the biggest thing that rules the sector would be to draw from your transport policy. We have a national transport policy. I'm not sure you have even seen it yourself. Nobody has publicized it. In our last meeting at the Ministry of Transport, it was what we talked about. But let's publicize this. But who is leading? It's the Ministry of Transport that must lead it in any way. So it needs to be publicized. We need to pick out what the industry must do. But unfortunately, what we end up with is still the silos, everyone doing their own thing. The places where we need to come together to solve problems like the plastic issue, environmental protection, plus GMA or Ministry of Environment, all these conundrum we have not been able to untangle. So 2021, we'll probably still end up with the waste coming to the beaches. You still have the NGOs and international diplomatic community cleaning up all the time because the source problem, I don't think we are ready or have even started discussing it yet. I've seen the Greater Accra Regional Minister active doing certain things, but I don't think he has touched on that area yet of insisting that garbage and other things will be managed in a proper manner. So I don't have much expectation in that arena. My biggest one that I'm passionate about is the investment and promotion part. I hope, because we are still talking to our own colleagues, that people, the organizations would at least be more open to the public and offer much more services than just punitive measures to people who always try to start businesses or provide a service for the industry. So my expectations, it looks like they're all negative, but it's probably going to be business as usual. I'm not very confident with a lot of the things that are happening in fisheries, in the maritime transport aspect, in terminal operations. I think one of the highlights of the terminal operations is the Takoradi Atlantic Terminal. it's a local company, but I'm very skeptical about that project because Takoradi is not even doing 50,000 TAs a year. So the idea of that investment, going for a loan to do it, I don't know, because we've tried to force cargo through the ports, saying that textiles should go through Takoradi. We've had all those decrees by presidents. They never worked. So I don't know how they're going to recoup their money for this huge investment they are doing there.
Okay. Thank you. Aims is actually 2050.
50, okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Alberta.
Yeah.
The final question. What are your expectations
My
for the maritime industry in the year 2021?
Okay. I think since Jonas has made it all gloomy, I'll try to liven it up a bit. um, and actually, I'm excited about the fact that now the discussion around the oceans is being popularized. Little by little. The fact that we are even gathered here to have these kind of discussions is a very good sign that there is hope. Because the more we gather around the table and discuss the issues, the more we brainstorm and try to find solutions. So I'm very hopeful that from platforms like this, such discussions can cascade up and to the level where we get the kind of ocean we want to see. That being said, in 2021, interestingly, the World Ocean Day celebration is going to be centered around the theme life and livelihoods, where the idea is that our very lives and our livelihoods are tied to the oceans. And this for me is a very powerful theme for us to start thinking about. Again, it takes us back to the ocean decade, it takes us back to ocean literacy to get us thinking around the oceans, how we have dealt, our relationship with the oceans have been in the past, and moving forward, how we visualize it. So I am hopeful. I think in discussions like this, we get to know, like we've also brought up in the discussion, a lot of things are disjointed. A lot of things happening in our space, in our maritime space, are disjointed. We don't know where this is. We don't know what this person is doing where. But in bringing the discussions up like this, we get to pull the strings together and understand where we can find a common ground. I want to speak on Ghana's National Integrated Maritime Strategy. We spoke about having a strategy that looks more seaward and looks at how we can make we can make better use of our ocean with a sustainable development mentality. And it is a very good thing that such a document has been drafted. But unfortunately, it has not been given the potency because it has not been signed. So in 2021, one of my high expectations is to have government sign that strategy for the implementation to take place. And I would advocate for ocean literacy to be on the agenda of the implementation of such document. So yes, all in all, I feel hopeful that 2021 also being the starting point for the ocean decade. It's a good year for ocean transformation.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. vanDyck, over to you.
Okay. I'd like to concentrate more on the port sector, and not necessarily ports, but the connections to ports. I see that the government is putting in place a lot of measures to ensure that we do have port hinterland connectivity. And so my expectations of this year are that the government continues to invest in these things. But it's a bit confusing as to exactly what the government is trying to achieve with this, because the projects seem to be many and interconnected, and at some points also it looks as if they're afterthoughts. You can see that we have, for example, the Boankra integrated logistics terminal, which is linking the ports of Tema and Takoradi to the hinterlands, right? And so to facilitate that terminal, they have to have some sort of rail connection. The rail connection that is being constructed at this time initially was the Tema Kosombo and Pakadan railway line, which is being constructed now, and it looks as if they want to connect that terminal to certain locations further up north. So you'd have that. So you have that railway line going through to Akosombo and Pakadan, and then going up north. And then you have another project, which is the Ghana-Burkina Faso Railway Interconnectivity Project. And I think recently, I think it was last year or early this year, the Minister for Railway Development actually was in Burkina Faso to reaffirm Ghana's commitment to the project, and they met up with the Minister for Transport there and also the Prime Minister to give them a few more details. And that's a 1,100 kilometer railway project, also connecting Accra to Ouagadougou. So the initial project, which is the Accra Akosombo project that has been worked on, it seems now that will now be an extension to the Burkina Faso project. So you would see that it will probably connect the line from Tema to Mpakadan to Hohoi, and then from Hohoi to Yendi, and then Yendi all the way to Ouagadougou in Burkina Faso. And then let us not forget about the Eastern Corridor Road project. Now, I don't really have an update on what's happening. I know that recently the African Development Bank did a study to look at the progress of that particular project. But that's a road project along the Eastern Corridor of Ghana, which by my calculations is probably side by side with our rail project, right? Anyway, having multiple modes of transport is good. It's good to have these competitive modes. When you think about it in a much broader picture, basically what we're saying is our railway transport is going to compete with our road transport. And so truck drivers is not just about time, it's about time, handling, safety, professionalism, also the lack of border, what you call them, people or policemen on the road harassing truck drivers. So all these things will now be taken seriously because you have another competing mode of transport. And that, I think, going forward should be what should push our ports to be more competitive. A nice competitive interland connectivity will also bring out whether our port should be selected as a port of choice by our landlocked neighbors. So that's my outlook for 2021, continuation of these projects. Hopefully the government and the private sector, they get the investment that they need and they put it into the project. They finish the projects and let's see what happens. I'm actually quite positive for the maritime sector. That's my outlook for 2021.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to my fellow panelists, and also for to our online business viewers. We say a big thank you to you. Now remember, this conversation is being spearheaded by African Transportation Convos and the Maritime Initiative Africa. Then, the topics are brought to you by top lines from South Africa. Let's spread the word, let's promote ocean literacy, and let's help cure sea blindness. Thank you.
Thank you
very much.